Well, hello, everybody. Pastor Randy here. Welcome to Making It Simple. Great to be with you on this beautiful Thursday. Praying that you are well wherever you are today in this world. There's so many different things going on that strike fear. We hear the horror stories from around the world. We get the bad notices in the mail, the upsetting phone calls, the messengers nowadays, and text and whatever the case. I want us to look today as we begin a new study, and as we continue in Joshua's journey, how that applies to us right now. Operating in fear and operating in faith is obviously two completely different things. And as we see in this journey that we look at from the book of Joshua, we're going to be reading today from chapter 3. Um, it really is two completely different things as to how we move forward or whether we stay in place. I want to read to you Joshua chapter 3, beginning in verse 1. Then Joshua rose early in the morning, and they set out for the acacia grove, and they came to the Jordan. This is the big river, it's right in front of them. And he and all the children of Israel lodged there before they crossed over. So it was after 3 days that the officers went through the camp, and they commanded the people, saying, when you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God, and the priests, the Levites, hearing it, bearing it, then shall you set out from your place and go after it. Go after it. What does that require? That I'm willing to move, right? Yet there shall be a space between you and it, about a half a mile by measure. Do not come near it, so that you may know the way by which you must go, for you have not passed this way before. It's very clear as we look at the circumstances around us today that we're living in a time of great fear, or at least, and I say this not to be controversial or conspiratorial, but at least that is the desire of many who are attempting to invoke fear. Because when one lives in fear, they stay locked in place. They don't move. They don't try. They don't fight back. As we're looking at this transition, not just a change, but the transition in Joshua from follower to leader, it's absolutely important that we understand the need in our own life from moving from fear to faith. Because what does fear do, friends? Fear cripples. Fear paralyzes. Fear robs and steals. In some cases, it kills, destroys. In other words, fear adds nothing. Now, is there such thing as a healthy fear? It all depends on how we look at that. Should we be fearful of something that can harm us? Or should we listen to the warning? You see, a bear can eat you. A snake can bite you. But if there's signs all over the parkway, if there's signs all over the walking path that says, be careful, they're around, should we fear that, or should we be mindful? There's a lot of difference, because fear keeps me from taking that walk. Being mindful makes sure that I'm cautious that there's an element around me that could harm me. See, fear is defined as anxiety or dread. Many people suffer with that. Uneasiness or concern beyond a healthy level. Anticipation, here's the important one, and this is the one that I think trips up a lot of people. Anticipation of danger, whether real or perceived. Think about that for a minute. How many things do we fear that only exist in our mind? We all grew up hearing about the boogeyman that might be hiding under the bed. He was never there because he wasn't real. Many people today in high positions try to invoke fear. And we've seen this over the last several years. And what did that fear do? That fear kept people at home. That fear kept people from communicating with each other. That fear kept people from seeing their loved ones who, in some cases, passed away. Some people, years later, after a lot of things have been debunked and proven to not be true, some today are still living in that same fear. Existing in fear is not living. I'll say that again. Existing in fear is not living. It is taking on breath. It is being up and about, walking around in your house behind locked doors. But it's not living. I mean, it's like drifting without a sail or floating around, not really knowing where things are going to go or how things are going to end up. Having no foundation, having no anchor, having no direction, and no intention of having one because you're scared to death of what may come. Nothing, friends, nothing, and I mean nothing, can be built on fear. There is no progress. Nothing comes about this. Now, are there things that we all have concern about? Are there all things that we are fearful of? Absolutely. Fear of heights and fear of water and all those other things. I get all the phobias that are out there. I understand that. But if we don't move from fear to faith when it comes to life, we stay locked in place and we don't accomplish anything, which doesn't help us or anyone. 2 Timothy 1:7 is a very familiar passage, but it clearly says that God has not given us the spirit of fear, but rather of a sound mind. So what does that tell us? That God has given us what we need. We reject that. If God didn't give us fear, then who did? Think about that for a minute. If I'm embracing something that God didn't give me, that's on me. Faith, on the other hand, though, faith is hope, a confident expectation. Faith is trust. It is progressive. Faith brings life, and it more abundantly, as Jesus promised to do. Faith is like that anchor that places us in a safe spot that says, okay, hold on. Trust me. Hold on. Just hold on right here and listen. Listen for the directions of God. Just like we just read in that passage. When you see, you will go. When you hear, you will go. We're going to cross over. We're going to get there, whatever the case. Faith is defined as unflagging trust, belief without proof. Just as it tells us in the book of Hebrews. It's the evidence of things not seen. So we see clearly there is a defining line, if you will, between fear and faith. So as we look at this journey that Joshua's on and his transition into leadership, we see this includes the acceptance of God's call on his life. In other words, when God says go, he says you can do it because he's calling you to it. He didn't say if you were equipped, he will do that. Are you willing to go? Are you willing to have faith in his command and his call? But also we see the willingness of the people. Just as we said in these last several lessons that we had, we will go where you say go and do as you say do. We see a trust in them. That is a level of faith because of his faith in God. He made it clear to them, the Lord's instructions, and it truly came down from moving from fear to a place of faith. It was the only way to get where they needed to be. It would be the only way they would cross the Jordan. Because as the raging river stands before them, getting to the other side of that seemed to be a mere impossibility. Many times we look at life the same way. The battle that stands before us, the situation that stands before us seems impossible. And so we utter the words, I can't do this. I want you to understand this, friends. Fear will rob you of every single opportunity that comes your way if we allow it. It's the same way as the enemy. He has no power over us that we don't give him. Now, fear in and of itself is an emotion that we absolutely feel from time to time. However, do we hold on to that? Or do we trust in the words that God has given us? I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. I didn't tell you this would be easy. I didn't tell you that it wouldn't be without some difficulty or some strain. But just like we'll see later in this lesson tomorrow, when Jesus said to the disciples, let us go to the other side, it was the let us go part that was the most important. But that was the most important part that they missed, because that was an affirmity that they would make it. Here, we see the people have been told, this is the steps that will happen when it's time to cross over the Jordan. That was another affirmation that crossing over would be the case. And so it was the only way they were going to get where they needed to go. We find them, as we look at these first few verses, looking at basically this impossible situation. They were going to be crossing over the Jordan, but they weren't sure how that was going to happen. Almost every day when we wake up, we may feel that same possibility, that same feeling. How am I going to do this? We'll talk about that tomorrow. Moving from fear to faith. It'll change your life. God bless you. I'll see you soon.